Good evening. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. We are going to be talking about high frequency words tonight. So I'm kind of excited. I like talking about these. We're going to go through some slides and some information about high frequency words, and then we're going to do some activities. And I will also be answering questions. So I'm going to try to wait until the end to answer questions so that I can make sure that I can look at the questions and the presentation and the document camera and all those fun things. So my name is Jennifer Hasser. I'm with Kendore Learning, and I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. So I call some of the words discovery words, so that's why it's called discovery words in the beginning, and I'll explain that as we go. Okay, so first off, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what we've done here for over 20 years. We have kind of three components of Kendore, and that is Syllables Learning Center, which was our first endeavor after I stopped teaching in public school, where we do online tutoring all over the world, actually, but mostly in the US. Then Kendore Learning, which is where we sell our materials, our games. We have our online store. It's also kind of where we do our professional development and our teacher training. Okay, so they're kind of two, kind of slightly separate entities. And my background is I'm a former president of the International Dyslexia Association of Georgia and regional representative with them. We're accredited by IDA and also through MSLEC. So, I'm also a parent of a dyslexic and a kind of normal, regular old reader. And I have twins. They're now old, but they're 24. But definitely I've had experience with this content with my own students, with a daughter that struggled, a daughter that didn't, and working with other people's kids. So this is kind of a lifetime. Our center actually just celebrated its 20th anniversary, but I've been doing this longer than the actual center's been around. All right, so let's start talking about high frequency words. Okay, otherwise known as sight words. There's lots of names, but the history of what people refer to as sight words started with the Dolch word list, which was first published in 1928. And it was, for K through 2, right? So here are the words that you need to know. The thing I think is really amazing is that both Dolch and Fry did not have Google. They didn't have the ability to sort words in Excel like I do. And they took a bunch of books and counted all words. And I think that's pretty impressive. So even though I think the way they taught it, the time has passed, it doesn't mean I'm not impressed with how much work was put into this, especially when we start getting into the 1,000 most frequent words. And now we have computers that can just do that, pretty easily for us. Both believe that these words should be memorized based on frequency. I think we all kind of are in agreement that these words need to be known. They're highly frequent. We can't stop and sound out a high frequency word every time we see it. So how do we maximize the way that we teach it is really what we're going to be talking about this evening. Okay, so I have been teaching for a long time, almost 30 years. So I see the names change, whether it's sight words or high frequency words or automatic words or whatever people want to call them. I think we can kind of all agree that this is kind of the definition, right? They make up 60% of all words in the page, more than 60%. So if we don't have these automatized, then what's going to happen is it's going to slow us down. We're going to have to sound out other words and spend more time on those content words that are more difficult. So if we can have these automatized, then it's going to make everything easier, right? Reading, spelling, writing, so I think that's kind of the agreement. Now, high frequency words, the reason that we don't call them sight words anymore is because basically as you develop your reading, you start to know almost all words by sight eventually, because I rarely sound out a word unless I'm in a different genre, or somebody's name, or in an unfamiliar language, right? Because at this point there's a lot of words that I know just by glancing at them. But when the kids are little, then that's not the case. So we want to, that's why they kind of changed it to high frequency, which means these are highly frequent words. But all words kind of we want to end up knowing by sight, being able to pull that out of our orthographic memory quickly and efficiently, saving time so that we are using our resources, in our working memory for comprehension and imaging, and holding on to that information instead of spending all that energy sounding things out or trying to guess at them or figure them out, right? So when I talk about high frequency words and how to teach them more efficiently, it starts with how can we sort them in a way that is going to make it easier for us. So, traditionally there's we go through the first 100 and the second 100 and the third 100 and fourth 100. And even though that is the order of frequency, I feel like there is a easier and faster and more efficient way to, because we're going to need to get through all of them anyway, we might as well sort them, right? It's kind of like saying, if I have to meet, my aunt and my cousins, they wouldn't say, no, you have to meet this aunt first because you're gonna see her more frequently. You could say these cousins go with this aunt and these cousins go with this aunt. You don't have to sort them by frequency, but the whole group is going to be more frequent than it would be, strangers, so it's really, let's look at these words that we're going to need to know no matter what, and how can we sort them in ways that are going to make it easier for our students to remember them. So we'll talk about the difference between function words and those lexical content words, but we can also sort them by phonetic pattern, by that, phonetic or non-phonetic. When I refer to non-phonetic words, I really just mean in the sense that my students have not been introduced to them yet. They have not been taught, or they have an unexpected spelling, right? Some are going to be easier because they are, the basic 44 spellings, not a lot of, different things going on with those words. And it's going to be, pretty much our CVC kind of patterns, and easier for us to figure out. So when we look at this, we can, if we break things down this way, we're going to be able to see, a relationship between words that we can clump them into so that it's easier for kids, right? So when I sort words, I look at, are they phonetic? Are they not phonetic? Irregular, unexpected. This is completely dependent on what you have taught, right? So I see there's a question all the time, is this an irregular word? Is this a phonetic word? Well, the only way for a teacher to know whether it's been taught or not is to know what concepts they've taught. So sometimes I see these lists where they're pre-generated and saying these are, irregular and these are regular. I think that's a little bit dangerous. I think the bigger benefit is if the teachers are aware of how to sort their own words and aware of what they have taught. Okay, so I, of course, have my own sequence, my own curriculum. So I sort them one way, you might sort them a slightly different way, and that's okay. Tonight, of course, I'm going to be talking about the way I do it because it's, the way I do it. So as we go through, you may see some differences from your, scope and sequence, and that's okay. All right. So we can sort by concrete versus abstract, like the word hat, it's pretty concrete. Kids are going to understand that. The word that is a little bit more abstract. So if they, if you want to pull the concrete ones aside, you're going to probably have an easier time learning to read them, knowing what they mean, being able to use them correctly. And we want to make sure that they know the meaning, right? why would we ever want to learn how to spell a word and read a word that we don't know what it means? Right. So if we're going to spend all this energy, we need to make sure that kids know these words, that they can use them orally, that they can use them in a, use them in a sentence, that they're aware that a lot of these words are going to have multiple meanings. The shorter a word is, the more likely it has multiple meanings, right? So I could say the word fit, which is what I would consider a phonetic, CVC word that has the basic spellings. But if we talk about meanings, we can have a noun like don't have a fit, a verb, like it fit in the box, or an adjective, wow, she looks fit, right? Those are, three different ways right there to use those, but there are many, many more. And so when we bring in that part of speech component and multiple meanings with these words, it's going to help kids to anchor to them so that if they see them and being used in multiple ways, that if they don't know what it means in that sentence, they might say, I know what that word means, but I don't think that's the meaning that's in this sentence. And they'll know that there is a possibility that there are many other possibilities for that word. And that's going to keep them from, just not comprehending. So, and it's a good way to spend some time learning the spelling, and talking about, parts of speech, right? So it's never too early to talk about those things. Kids understand parts of speech; they really do, right? So when we talk about word relationships, that's like homophones and synonyms and antonyms. There's a lot of those in our high frequency words like TO, TOO, TWO. The compare and contrast of going through and talking about, are these spelled the same? Do they sound the same? Do they look the same? Is going to be a good way to go through and analyze them. And we'll talk about a bunch of ways to reinforce these as we go. So morphology, which is, meaning, what do these things mean? I personally think it is never too early to talk about morphology. Kindergartners are completely capable of understanding it, and it gives them an opportunity to learn how to spell and read those words, um, by comparing, other spellings, what they hear when they hear these words used out loud, and we can give them some of the, submorphemes that contribute to the meaning of these words, right? I am going to be answering questions at the end, just so I can kind of make sure I stay on track. So I just saw someone raise their hand. If you could type it in the questions for me, that would be great. We also are going to be having a CLIC, which is a Kendore Learning Instructional Community, on Thursday. And in that, it's more of a meeting setting. So you can register for that online if you would like to join us then. And then, you'll get a lot more. We try, again, we try to have free things. We try to have low cost things. And then we try to have really, really, really expensive things like taking me to Hawaii to tutor your child. No, I'm just kidding. But we have so we have the free webinars, then we're going to have the clicks, and that's a meeting format. So there's going to be more opportunity to chat, and a lot more materials that are sent, with you to you afterwards. Okay. So etymology is like the history of a word and how it evolved, its language of origin. And, to me, morphology and etymology are really, they go hand in hand. So we can talk about where this came from and what it means. A lot of our high frequency words come from Old English. Now, some people call it Old English Anglo-Saxon. I prefer to call it Old English because it has the term English in it, and old, and kids know that. So these are just words that kind of came from, all the people before us. If I get a chance to go more in depth with them, then I absolutely will. But I'm not going to separate these little words into Norse, Dutch, all of the different influences that kind of come together to make Old English initially. But, I look at it as when I'm teaching first grade, let's say I have 180 days in a year. Let's be honest, we probably have about 130 hours total in most of the places where I've worked, with picture day and holidays and, someone's birthday and all the other things that kind of disrupt instruction. When I only have 130 hours, I want to use them, as wisely as possible. But if I have more time, then I absolutely try to get as in depth as I possibly can. Right. Now pattern only, when I talk about that, that's either same spelling or same sound. Talk about the phonology, the language of origin. There's a lot of different sub patterns that we can look at in words and say, okay, what do these have in common? How can we use those commonalities to help us to remember them? So we're going to go through some ways, I have that we can sort. And then when, we're all done, I can, answer all your questions and hopefully you'll come to our click and thought about it after a couple days and have more questions. I love questions. Okay, so we move on. What are lexical/content words? These are words that are often easier to spell than function words. They carry the meaning in a phrase or a sentence. They are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So these are the words that are going to carry our meaning. They usually carry the accent in a sentence. And so they tend to be easier for kids to learn, right? So then there are function words. These are harder to define. So if you ask a kid, what does the word of mean, right? OF, they're going to say, oh, it was made of wood. That's not defining the word of. So these words are definitely harder to define. If I said define the word the, most kids aren't going to tell me it's an article. They're going to try to use it in a sentence. And that's kind of what happens with these. So these are most of our high frequency words are function words. They're grammatical words that hold the sentence together. So like are, have, can, are auxiliary verbs, are prepositions, conjunctions, pronouns, articles, all these fun things. Many function words have two possible pronunciations, a weak version and a strong version, and we'll kind of talk about that as we go. So if you look at this sentence, run to the store, when we say that sentence out loud, we will stress those lexical or content words. So you can really hear run and store. If I said, to my children, run store, they have two options. I'm going to run to the store or I want them to run to the store, right? But if I just said they wouldn't have any idea what I was talking about. So those lexical words really carry the meaning. Now, when we first have beginning readers, we would say, they would decode this word if they said run to the store. And then we would try to build prosody, which is that fluency where they start to go run to the store. And then hopefully we get to where they're saying run to the store, right? Because when we speak, we don't say every single syllable. We don't say run to the store. We say run to the store. So those function words will change pronunciation in connected text, right? In that connected speech. So when we have that text together, it's not individual words, and they're saying it out loud, that's connected speech. And that to the is going to end up sounding like to the, right? I'm going to run to the store. And it's not, clear, crisp, and concise. So those are those two pronunciations, the strong and the weak pronunciation is you're going to have, the, right? Like, and the majority of the time it's going to be the. So when you're talking about the word the to kids, you're going to have to talk about stress, right? So we have a stress time language, not a syllable time language. And since it is a stress time language, what happens is we put our stress on those lexical words and we don't stress the function words in between, right? So when we're asking kids to read fluently, sometimes we don't talk to them about the fact that those words are not going to sound like they do when we're talking about them initially. Like we're going to learn the word to, and then they say to the, right? So sometimes when you're using it, what does it sound like in connected speech? That's what's going to happen when we do connected text, right? So those things do work together. But if we don't tell them, then it's how do we expect them to become fluent? So I'm just going to ask you real quick to out loud, wherever you're sitting, say that last sentence and listen to what those function words say. Okay, so I could tell some of you didn't say it out loud, but to those of you who did, I appreciate that. Okay, but if you say it, it would be Tom and Sue had a nice dinner, right? Tom and Sue had a nice dinner, right? We don't say Tom and Sue had a nice dinner, right? It's Tom and Sue, right? Had a nice dinner, right? So that's important to discuss with kids as you're going through. It's not going to be a nice dinner, right? So that's where these function words can cause us even more difficulties because we're not talking to them about what actually is happening. We're over enunciating a lot of times in instruction, but when they go having, they hear it in connected speech, it's not going to sound like that. And we want them to read it in connected text, just like they do in their connected speech. That's our goal, right? That's prosody. Okay. When we have to sort words, if we're looking at phonetic versus non-phonetic, remember it's dependent upon what you've taught. For phonetic words, those can easily be taught with a target vowel sound. So if I was teaching I could teach big, bit, did, him, if, in, it, sit, this, which, wish, and with all together. Then I could take those and I could sort them into words that would be easier for them, right? Like sit is going to be easier for them because it's concrete. They know sit, right? They know what a wish is, but maybe if would be a little bit trickier. So we can sort them and then we can talk about them and in those, either that lexical concrete or those function words, and make sure that they're practicing them orally so that they, know how to use them. Right. And remember, there are, especially like with the word wish, most of our words that are one syllable that are actually content words, and wish is a content word, can be both a noun and a verb. And oftentimes they can be more than one noun and more than one verb. And so if you think about the word wish, I can make a wish for another wish, right? So if I want a wish, then that can be a verb. And if I receive a wish, then it can be a noun. So, talking to them about these things is important. I can't tell you how many classrooms I've gone into where I see on the wall like an anchor chart of nouns and an anchor chart of verbs. And on one says dream. And I'm like, wait a second, I can dream and I can have a dream. That's both a noun and a verb. And I think that can be confusing. So I think it's really good to address that right away and talk to the kids about the fact that that can happen. And use a lot of oral language, right? So a lot of, let's talk about this. How do we use these? What do these words mean? How can they be both? Because kids do understand that. They really do. And especially like, even if it's a homophone, when they say nice to meet you, they don't think you're going to be chopped up into hamburger meat, right? They know there's a difference between meat that you eat and meat when you greet somebody, right? So though kids are pretty smart, we don't give them enough credit, I think, a lot of times, because they are little language machines. Their oral language is just going crazy. Like they're like little computers, little, just thousands and thousands of words they're learning how to use and how to understand way more than we are currently so, at our age. All right. So the word here. So this is a way to sort these, because when we're looking at it, we're looking at, okay, what does here mean, right? The word here is in the word there, and the word here is in the word where. So if we are going to sort these together and talk about, where am I? Here, who's over there? Where are they? And you can talk about the spelling of these and that these components are in all three of these words. So that way you're kind of clumping them together, talking about them, showing them the pattern, using them orally, The vowel shift is when, in Old English, there was a time when vowel shifted, when they kind of moved up your mouth. So where a lot of words had the A sound, which is down a little bit lower, your jaw's lower, A, and they went up to E and E. So we'll see a lot of times that these are moving up up your mouth. There's a lot of time like the word great is A, EA says A, great, but then EA also says bread, and then it says eat. So it goes from A to E to E. So your jaw moves up. And some of the words were left behind. So not all of them moved, but a lot of them did. And that can explain a lot of the irregular spellings that we have in Old English. Right. So if there's a situation where you can't use a Y, you use an I. So when we look at these words, which are, the first two columns are highly frequent, and the last column, not so much, but still important to learn. So it depends on the age of the students that you have, but you can look at them and say, okay, look at how these kind of, if we, have that EY and we're not using it, when we get to there, then we would switch it to an I. So with, says and then to said, we're not going to have SAYD, we have SAID, right? So remember I told you that A in SAID moved up to that E sound in some instances, then this is what we see there, okay? So, but putting them in their, meaning, the relational to their meaning is going to make it a lot easier for kids to see where these things happen, especially if you can show them where they happen with different combinations. Right. We're going to do some mapping with these in a minute. Right. So if we get to words like do, we can show them that there's a pattern with another word that they are going to have to know that's highly frequent, go. So the O may not sound the same, but we can look at the pattern of saying, okay, we have do plus ES is does, and go plus ES is goes, and then do plus NE is done, and G and go plus NE is gone. So at least visually, we can look and say, okay, these are visually similar, and we can see that this is what has happened, but now we have some sound shifts. Now, when we have words like does and done, those are both, function words. And in we're looking at, sometimes they're probably going to be unaccented. So if we have that does and done and versus do, but a lot of the time that do says duh, right? What do you want to do? Right? So what do you want to do? So what do you want to do? So depending on where it is in the word and what function it is, role it's taking on, you're going to hear either that, d like does or do, right? And so pointing these things out to the kids is helpful because it happens. People will say, I don't want to confuse the kids. I think it is more confusing to not talk to them about these things because they know that's happening, right? And if they know that's happening, then you're kind of addressing it head on instead of pretending like it's not. And I think that that's really fair for kids to treat them, like that makes sense, right? Okay, if we have the L in should, right? We could talk about shall. Shall I? Yes, you should. That L is an etymological marker of the relationship between shall and should, right? Will and would. And then can and could is kind of a little bit of an outlier, but because we have that, should, would, the L was kind of put in there, but its relationship is to can. Now that k and, for that K and C sounds, they're associated with to know, knowing something. So, can I do that? Yes, I can, because I know how. Could I? Yes, I know how. So I can, so I could. That is something that is going to be, pervasive in a lot of our high frequency words, because if we have, can and could, we're going to see that in other words, right? Okay. Now these can cause us a little bit of a problem, right? So UGH says, because UGH does two things. It says the sound or it says nothing. So if we can tell kids that you're going to have two options here, you're going to have, it's not going to say anything or it's going to say. Now, if I have the word laugh, I can hear three sounds in it. Right? But I won't know how to spell it unless I spend some time, analyzing it, looking at it, practicing it. But it does become completely phonetic, right? Because now if they look at that and say, do you see a UGH? Yes. What are your two choices? It says nothing or it says the sound. So LAUGH will say la, right? Or it'll say laugh. And now we've narrowed it down for reading to only two options. And we will have to overlearn it till it becomes something that we have orthographically mapped in our brain to make sure that we know, that we're going to use the UGH spelling. So I'll talk about strategies for repetition, because it's not usually just the first time that they get that. They're going to need that repetition to make sure that they recognize the word when they see it, that they know how to spell it, because spelling is so important when we're doing these, not just reading, because if you can spell a word, you can read a word. Just because you can read a word doesn't mean that you can spell it, right? There's probably lots of words that you could read, but if somebody asked you to spell it, you would be, challenged. For me, that word is hors d'oeuvre. So I can read hors d'oeuvre and I can say, oh, I know what hors d'oeuvre means. And if somebody says we're going to have hors d'oeuvres, I'm like, I'm in, I'll go. But if I had to write hors d'oeuvre, I would say snacks. I'd write snacks because I'm always like, how do you spell that again? Because it's not a word that I really have to spell often. And if anybody knows me personally, then I pretty much would probably have snacks versus having hors d'oeuvres. Sounds way too fancy for me. So these spelling activities that we're going to be talking about, they're going to help us to cement this into their memory so that when they need to pull them out, it's automatic. And that means if they can spell it, they can read it. Right? I'll tell some of my kids, I'll say, they're like, well, that's not true. I can spell words that I can't read. And I'll say, tell me one, and they'll tell me a word. I'm like, well, you just told me a word, which means you know how to read it. So, it just doesn't work, to do it, the other way. Okay. So now for UGH, it says nothing. That's its other job. It says the sound or it says nothing. So when we teach these, we can sort them into, these, categories so that we're saying, okay, these are similar to one another. And why don't I teach these together? Right. So that way we're not just picking all the OUGH words and saying, oh, you just have to memorize all of these, because there are some that you have to memorize, because even the, vowel is not going to cooperate with what we know. But it doesn't mean that we can't put the easier ones together and then understand what that, UGH is doing in that word. Right. So these are some that I sort and kind of teach them together as some sub lessons to the lessons that I'm teaching as I'm moving through. So would we start with though and through and do? No. We're going to want to get through of and was, right? And do and to, and then, but we are going to work our way towards these words. And once we've taught them, we're going to have to make sure that we're repeating them, because kids are going to need multiple repetitions. And the worse their memory, because we know that, kids who struggle with spelling, kids who have dyslexia, they have very short, working memory capacity for holding on to these things, and their repetition. If you've ever read with a kid and it's like, they go, whoop ass. And you're like, well, that's was. And then you get to the next sentence and they go, whoop ass again. You are familiar with that, short-term memory where they're it's very hard for them to hold on to those bits of information. And we know that dyslexics have a particular difficulty with that orthographic memory component. So the more repetition we can do with them, and the more we can sort them and analyze them and find ways to repeat them frequently, they're going to be way more successful. Right. So this is another way to sort. You can sort by morphology. So ON, right, means one. So we could do one, only, once, alone. There's a really good video called Making Sense of Spelling. So you can, if you want to check that out, it's about that ON morpheme. There's also submorphemes, which are parts of words that contribute to the whole. So, when we look at that TW, a lot of blends, right? So TW is associated with two, the number two. So if you have the number two, even though it doesn't say TWO or TWO, sometimes we can't help the pronunciation, but we can help them to understand what it means. So then when they have to go and spell, a word like, I have 2 donuts, not that they're going to spell that right away, but then they know that 2 is the one that has the TW, because they're also familiar with twin and 12 and 20 and twist and twig. And a lot of those words that you can talk about orally, even though you may not be requiring them to spell between. Why do we call kids that are over 10 and under 13 tweens? Because they are between, right? Kind of a kid and a teenager. And that's where that term comes from. And that way we can explain these to kids so they understand the meaning. And then therefore they're going to be able to, spell what we would consider to be an irregular word like two. But we're attaching some meaning to it. It's going to differentiate it from the other twos. And that's going to help them to anchor to that faster and have less confusion. Then we have more like advanced phonics, depending on what you teach, what grade. So, words in English don't end in the letter V. So the word have, which seems irregular, is not irregular at all, right? Because that E could be doing 2 things there. It could be have or have. And it is not have, because have is not a word. So, and live and live, it's doing 2 jobs, because live is a word and live is a word. And so they can now know that there's 2 options for, what's going on here and which one's going to be right. So for live and live, it's going to be relying on context, and they can switch it if they, if one doesn't make sense the way that they're pronouncing it. But there is no word have, there's behave, but there is no word have on its own. So that's only going to be have. And then they can know that if they're spelling and they want to spell have, that words in English don't end in V, I have to put an E at the end. So that I have to. But you know how kids will say have to with an F? That is that, function word co-articulation thing going on in there. And the F and V are a voiced and unvoiced sound. So like it makes total sense that they would say have to instead of have to, right? Because all they're doing is just not turning their voice box on for the V from the F. So when we see spelling mistakes, if we kind of are understanding all of this, then we can say, okay, this is what I need to do to go back and reinforce this and talk about. Sometimes we hear it say F, instead of saying this isn't spelled with an F. Well, if they hear have to, then they might spell it that way because that's what they hear. So if you hear that, this is the word that we're really spelling with these letters, right? And that's not unusual for that to happen in English at all. Right. So, leave and then, give, right? It's not give, and it's definitely not jive, because it is Old English. And that's where we're going to get like get, girl, give, those hard G's in front of the I and the E. But they'll be in our function words, right? So, Old English has different characteristics than Latin and Greek, and our language primarily is composed of Old English, Latin, Greek, and French. So when we have French suffixes, we'll end up with that again, like barrage, right? That GE saying something different. But for now, most of our high frequency words are going to be Old English. That G is going to say G, even if it's followed by an I or an E. Right? So things to keep in mind when choosing words. What have I taught? How much time do I have? Are these words needed or valuable? Right? So if they're, going to be what I call discovery words are what a lot of people refer to recently as heart words, where you say you have to know them by heart. I call them discovery words because the majority of the time there is a reason for it. It's just in my 130 hours, I may not have time to go into that reason in depth. So I call them discovery words because I want them to know we're going to have to maybe dig a little deeper to find out what's going on in this situation. And we're going to have to discover more about the word. So we're not closing the book on it and saying, I just have to memorize these because English is weird. We're saying English makes sense. I just haven't gotten there yet. And kids understand that, right? So, how they know there's things that they don't understand that they're going to have to learn later. And that's really what we're telling them when we call them discovery words, is that we're going to discover later what is going on, right? We want to talk about our phoneme to grapheme correspondence, and we want to analyze any irregular or unexpected spellings, right? So when I do this, then what I'm doing is showing them, okay, I want to listen for the sounds and figure out how many sounds are in the word. And then I want to think, how am I going to spell them based on what I know, right? So, and when we're analyzing it, we definitely want to show them, how to map them correctly. So I'm going to switch over to the document camera for a second and show you how we can do some phonemes and phoneme grapheme mapping. Okay. So if I have my document camera and my dot and jot, I can go back and look at some of those words that we were talking about and dot and jot them. Right. So if I want to talk about the word to, then I would say to my students, how many sounds do you hear in the word to? They would go, ooh. We have 2 sounds in the word to. So how am I going to map this? Right? I'm going to map this by going in and saying, what's going to go in this box and what is going to go in this box. Now, if I want to spell to and I just have to, how on earth would I know that it's TWO? I wouldn't. So we always have to write out the word that we're analyzing that may be an unexpected spelling, so that we can look at it and analyze it, because the kids aren't going to just magically pick this out of their head if they've never seen it before and they don't know what it is. So we're going to look at this word and we're going to say, what word is that? And they're going to sit and they're going to say, I don't know. So we want to say this word is to, and you use it in a sentence for them. I have $2. Then we can talk to them about, can you use it in a sentence? Can you tell me, how we would use this word? And I use oral punctuation. So it would be, I have $2, and that's a period. I have a video on my YouTube channel about that if you want to check that out sometime. But that way they're kind of talking about capitalization, punctuation at the same time we're using these in sentences. So excellent. All right. If they say, I go to the store, then that's not the same one, right? So this is the number 2. If I have more than 1, but less than 3, this is what this looks like. This TW means 2. So if we have those words twin and like a twig that comes out of a tree, it's because it branches off into a second part. And kids can easily understand that. So now if I have 2 sounds in the word to, and I need to decide what is going to go into each box, I would do this, because that's one meaning, right? And then we've got our vowel. So if we don't know what this is, then I would put my little squiggly line under it, because this is the part that we have to think about. I've told them what TW means, but maybe when I'm spelling, I might have to think about it. So I want to put that there. That wavy line means I need to dig a little deeper. I need to discover more about this word. After a while, they won't need to put that under it if they truly understand it, and we don't have to do that, right? Now, if I had the word one, okay, so which is 1 less than 2. We would use it in a sentence. We'd talk about what it means. We would talk about how many sounds, but what we definitely have to do with this one is to write it up here, right? This is what the number 1 looks like. Now, how many sounds do we have in 1? We have 3 sounds, right? W, n. Right? So maybe your kids spell it W-U-N. We don't know. I don't, like if they're trying, that would be more of the one-to-one correspondence that they've learned so far. But if we have this, we have the first sound is W. The second sound is N. So this N says N regularly, and we've learned that and we know that. So that means this has to say 2 sounds. That's strange, right? But it goes like this. W. And this has the N. And I'll put that. It's not really saying anything or doing anything. It's not jumping over and making the O say O or any of those things. So that is how I would map 1. Now, if I have laugh, how many sounds do I have in laugh? I'm going to have 3 sounds, but I have to look at this in order to figure out how to spell it, because otherwise I'd probably spell it L-A-F and I'd be wrong. So when I look at this and this says laugh, right? And we have L-A, and I like to laugh, or my friends laugh at my jokes, however they want to, use it in a sentence. My kids would use it in a sentence. My mom laughs at her own jokes, which is kind of true. I do. See, I am, but I'm a dork. But I would go and say, what says "ul" be the L, what says "a," and I ask for opinions, right? And what did we learn about the UGH? One of the things that it does is it says the sound. So in this case, we're going to have a UGH in one box. And this is a part where we might need to dig a little deeper and find out more about that, right? But it's going to help us to know that when we look at these, oftentimes it's only one part of the word that we have to memorize. We don't have to memorize everything. We just have to pay attention to the fact that this box is not what we would have expected. So we're going to have to dig a little deeper and find out more about it. And if I have the word said, like we looked at the word said, you'd have to put that up there. We're going to go S-E-D. We would use it in a sentence, talk about it. Then we're going to say what that looks pretty all right. That D is pretty much what we've learned. And so the only part that we're going to have to figure out is this part right here. Right. So it's not said, it's going to be said. Now, we might need to know this word before we get to talk to them about those changes from a Y to an I, or vowel shifts or things like that. So this would be kind of how we're going to wait till we get there and talk about that would be the part that we would dig a little deeper in, right? And figure out why did this happen, and maybe learn about the great vowel shift, talk about the changes between, those patterns that do the same exact thing, right? So dot and jot to me is super important for these discovery words, the ones that mostly people are calling, irregular. But now you can see that there's a lot about them that makes sense when we compare them with other words. So, TWO may seem, wow, that's really weird, right? But it's not. When we look at it in comparison to all these other words, when we're looking at it, we now know, okay, that's what that's going to say, because we're familiar with it, but it's also, we now know what it means because we've learned a little bit more about it, right? So this is how I dot and jot. This is phoneme grapheme mapping, right? So we're going from our sound to our symbol, but for the irregular ones, we have to put them up here. Now, if I'm spelling it, I would still do the same thing. I would say, can you use it in a sentence and all of those things, but we wouldn't need to put it up there because it's what we would consider phonetically regular. With what I've taught, it. Right. So if I have taught it and I've taught t, then they should be able to do that. And so that makes it easier. Right? So that's why I initially support that, sort them into those two categories so that I can, take the easier ones and teach them all together, and take the harder ones and spend more time analyzing them and mapping them and talking about why they are doing what they do. Okay. So this is Dot and Jot. I also use my discovery word pages. So this is giving them that reinforcement, that ability to kind of look at these, the word as a whole. Now I've got my crayons and pencil on here. So there. Okay, so this is what I use for them. We always say we gather our tools. These are our tools. Then we're going to take the grid. We're going to put it underneath like this. I'm a lefty, so you always want to tilt the paper depending on whether they're lefty or righty. And I would go, okay, we've already introduced this. We've mapped it. We've talked about it. And now we're going to do some reinforcement. So I may, let me go through it. We can't sound it out. We can't go at it because that's not going to work. So we'll have to say the letter name, S-A-I-D, spell said, right? S-A-I-D, oh, forgot to dot my I, spell said, right? And I do that twice. I trace over it and see if I've gathered any evidence, because we're trying to discover more about this. And if you're an archaeologist, you're going to be digging and trying to look for some clues, right? So sometimes an archaeologist might find a bone, but he doesn't know what animal it goes with. And he's going to have to wait and dig deeper to see if he could find a new type of dinosaur, right? Then we switch to our pencil. We're going to trace over it and go S-A-I-D, spell said, S-A-I-D, spell said, S-A-I-D, spell said, 3 times. Any more than that, and it starts to sound like gibberish to them. So we want to fold it over. And now we're going to try to remember what it is that we learned. So we'll spell it. And if I get stuck, I always tell the kids that they're allowed to flip it back and self-check. I don't call it cheating. I call it self-checking. That way, if they don't remember, they can flip it over, but we want to take it out of their working memory long enough to make them try to recall it, because if we don't, it may not get into their long-term working memory. Then we will use our discovery word ink. You take your finger, place it down, space. Right. Write it again, put a space. This is, it just disappears off your finger. So it doesn't leave any residue. So I love that using this, but you can just use a piece of paper and a grid or whatever, however you want to do it. This is just the way that, that I do it. And we have our discovery words in a discovery word book, so that, based on our curriculum, we can use these as we need to learn them, right? Before, a lot of these can be explained, but they might need them before it is time, right? So some of them are open syllables, but if I haven't gotten there yet and they need it for writing, then that's gonna, then I can pick and choose which ones I want to use, right? So that is our discovery word. So this is something, once they've learned it, it can be like a center activity. It can go home. It can, you can practice it. The parents can do it at home. However you want to use it, but definitely make sure it's been introduced, it's been mapped, and then this would be the practice. Okay. So it can't be the initial thing. because we don't want them just doing a word that they don't know. So I actually came up with this next idea when I was at a school and I was doing an observation, and a little girl had pulled a stick out of a can and she was making the word out of Play-Doh. And I said, "Oh, what word is that?" And her word was actually. And she goes, I said, "What word is that?" And she goes, "That word." And she just pointed at it. She had no idea what she was making out of Play-Doh, which means that's not worth doing. So I just made this actually for her class. It was just a center activity, is like, let's see this. Let's look at it, right? We've got to spell it SAID. We're going to say it, and it's written phonetically here. So when she looked at she had no idea how to pronounce it, and she had no way of figuring that out. So I put these on here so that they could know how to pronounce them. And then I want them to shape it. So this is just I'm going to do the eye because I'm terrible at making these. So I can do an eye, I think. The kids are way better than and then they spend their time kind of staring at it, right? Which is what we need, is that repetition. And then at the centers, they would, if they really feel like they know it, then they're allowed to hand it to their friend, and their friend can quiz them. And if they get it right, they're allowed to get the next one in the stack. And if not, they have to go do it again and practice it one more time before they get the next one. So it just gives them an opportunity to do something that is going to reinforce the words that have been taught, and be able to figure out what they actually say, how to pronounce them. Okay. I also play word games with my words. So this is another game that I have. So in this, there's multiple games that I play with these, but if you deal out 5 cards, and I had 5 cards in my hand, I would look at these and say, okay, I'm looking in my hand, and I have the ones that are irregular and the ones that are completely phonetic. And in here, I'm just going to kind of show you one game. I would have my hand, and whoever I'm playing with, I would say, they are coming to my party, so that I have to use it in a sentence so that the person I am talking to knows, what word it is. Because in here, there's a lot of, would, like I would like to go, is going to be, is it, a woodchuck could chuck wood, or is it, I would like to meet the woodchuck, right? So they have to use it in a sentence, and then whoever I was playing with now has to spell they. If they spell they correctly, it goes out in front of them, facing out for everybody else, and it's in their discoveries. They've discovered it, and it's out there on display, because maybe in 3 or 4 of the kids don't know it. They get to look at it and go, "Oh yeah, that's how you spell they," right? But if I had asked them to spell sure, and they spelled it SHURE, then it would go in the discard pile, which is still face up, so that next time they're like, "Oh yeah, it's SURE." I remember that because we mapped that and we learned that one. And then there's also, a mixture of the easier phonetic ones in the deck, so that you can practice all of them. And some of the kids can, pick and choose. They might not know how to read that one, so maybe they want to read hot for their friends. But you always have 5 in your deck or in your hand, and then at the end, whoever has the most cards in their discoveries, if they had them all lined up here, then they would be the winner. So in a classroom, or when I'm in tutoring, I play for a few minutes. Like I set a timer and played for that amount of time, and then whoever has the most wins. Okay. When I do my dry erase board, I'll do it so if the word is a discovery word, they have to write on this side. So if it was they would have to write it on this side. And if it was phonetic, then whatever color I have, they would have to write it on this side. And then they have to hold them up, and it just kind of gets them to stop and think about it and practice spelling, which is helpful. And then I also practice in their beads or the sand, so that if they have, of, they would have to go like this. And then I'll say, what do you have? They would have to say OF spells of, right? And then shake it back up. So it gives them multiple ways to kind of cement these in their brain. Some kids need, 2 or 3 repetitions. Some kids need 200. So knowing a couple different strategies is going to make it a lot easier. And lastly, before I start answering some questions and show you my last 2 slides, there is, I use my beach ball, and I take the cards and I put them in the pocket. So whatever words we're working on, because we don't work on all of them at the same time, right? We're going to put them in and then toss them around, and wherever their hand lands, they would have to read it and say 2, I have $2. And then as they get better, what I'll do is I'll put them, I'll say wherever your other thumb hits, because there's brown and there was 2. So if I caught it like that, I would have to say, I have 2 brown cows. So now I'm trying to do sentences and using more than one. So we're also working on developing working memory. So for reading, but before I toss it to my friend, they have to spell the word. So if the word is 2 or brown, they would have to spell it before I toss the ball to them. That way we have an expressive and receptive task going on that can go on back and forth between the kids to get them practice. And this is a lot of different ways to do it. So a lot of times these words, we feel like we have to drill and kill them till they have them, but I call it thrill and skill. So we can have a good time learning them and a good time with the repetition and develop those skills, and it will make life a lot easier, right? Especially for reading and spelling. So when you're doing this, right? After we have talked about what they mean and we've, analyzed their spellings and dot and jotted them, and then, done some reinforcement, we want to make sure that we are tracking their progress, that we look for the lack of transfer to writing, that we are giving them some assessments and always looping back, because a lot of times the reason kids don't know how to spell these words is because they haven't had enough repetition in a short period of time, right? So some people are like, well, we went over it like 6 weeks ago and now we're doing it again. Well, they're going to need repetition at a more frequent pace than that. And so don't forget to monitor that. It's very easy to not realize that it's been a while since you talked about it. That's the way I feel about my gym membership. If I asked the gym the last time I've been there, I bet you it's longer than I thought. So keep track of that and make sure that you're kind of paying attention to that transfer. Right? And then make it multisensory. Make sure it's fun. Have those dictation trays and the quicksand, discovery word book. You can work on handwriting. And hot lava is a game where I put them down on the ground and I call out the words and they have to hop on them. If they step on the wrong one, then they die a fiery, horrible death in the hot lava and have to go to the end of the line. So it makes it fun to kind of practice these things over and over and over and over again. Right? So thank you very much for attending. We're going to have Q&A now. If you are interested, we're having a click on Thursday night and you can register for that. It is in a meeting style format, like I said in the beginning, and so that you can ask questions and you'll get word lists, because I've already sorted all these words. So in the click, I send you word lists and I send you the mapping keys so that you don't have to do all of that. But anyway, I'm going to start answering some questions. So let me see what you guys have been asking while I've been paying attention to other things. All right. So, okay. This recording is going to go on our YouTube channel. So it is going to be available. So it'll be up there. It takes a few days to download onto YouTube for some reason. So, but we'll get it up there and you'll have it. We will also be sending you a certificate for attending tonight. if you've been online. It's not customized to each individual person, but it does say that you've attended. So you'll definitely get those. Right. What is a submorpheme? Okay, so some people call submorphemes phonesthemes, which just depends on who you're talking to, but it is a part of a word that contributes to the whole. So it is not the whole word. Like if you had cupcake, cup is a morpheme and cake is a morpheme, but a submorpheme would be like two. The TW references to, but it's still part of something else. So like in twin, it's not two ins, right? It's two children born on the same day. So it contributes to the whole. And that way you can, like in one, ON means the number one, but if you're the only one there, it's a different usage of that together. It's not, like you're on Lee, right? It's that part contributes to the meaning, the whole meaning of the word. That's what that means. Okay, homophones and how they're taught, specifically to kids with dyslexia. So if I am talking about two, and two, and I have talked about the fact that TWO has to do with the number two, and I can talk about the other two together, and we would practice using it. I'm going to the store too also. So you've got another one coming along. And now you've gotten rid of the TWO as being part of that confusion. So that makes it easier. When you have things like meat and meat, then, talk about it in terms that they know, like they have spaghetti and meatballs for dinner, and it's not the person that they are going to meet tomorrow. So it is easier, I think, to do those in word families. And that's why I don't put there, and there together. I put the here, where, and there together, because in there, that here is there, and it is a morphological connection, which I think makes it easier. And then eventually you can do a comparison between those three. But if you know that I'm over here and that's a place, and you know what here is, am I there or am I here? Where am I? That chunking those together all based on a location, I think is easier. So, but yes, I do talk about homophones, but mostly I point them out together, but then I talk about them in their relationships to other words with either compound words or prefixes and suffixes, because yes, they are confusing. So, but some, there are kids, they know how to spell certain words. Like maybe they know how to spell meatball because they eat it all the time. They see it, they would recognize it. Then you're taking a previously learned and known term and using it to anchor new information to it. So that is how I do that. I'm actually going to do a little bit of that on in our click, how to teach those. Okay. Do I have a comprehensive list of high frequency words broken down? Yes, I do. I'm going to give those out in the click, but when we say comprehensive, I'm really going to give the first 400, 600. I can't remember how many are on there, but I've broken down the first 4,000, but if you can get through the first, 400 to 600, you've done a pretty good job of getting through mostly the irregular ones. Okay. And I've broken them down by phonics pattern, and then I've split them out by, pattern, regular, irregular, all of that kind of thing. Okay, if someone from Asia, yeah, I will still ship you things. Yep, don't worry about that. Okay. Okay, so if we have, I also ask how many sounds and get them to count them. Yeah, so the grid, that's what we do, is we count the sounds. We want to make sure that they can hear them. But I definitely would put the word up first. So absolutely, because if you put the word up first, then you can analyze it. If it's sit or, get, and you've taught g, e, and t, then you don't have to. You can dictate that because you've already taught it, and you're telling them that you know it. I only hold kids accountable for what I've taught them, right? So I'm not, I'm not going to be like, oh, let's do hit, sit, mit, genre. And that's just me. So if I have taught them, then I can hold them accountable for that, then I would absolutely do that. Right. But yeah. Uh so let's see here. Let's see how many sounds. Okay, what is a simple resource to you recommend to learn about the vowel shift? I like that, asking for a friend. So with the great vowel shift, a lot of the sounds shifted. So finding like something specific as to what you can kind of see if you go into these vowel sounds, you see, when we teach, a lot of times you're taught to teach EA as eat bread and steak, but you're not telling them why, right? Why are these spelled differently? Why are there 3 sounds for that spelling? And, and we say eat bread and steak because eat is going to be the most frequent spelling and bread is the second and steak is the least. But we have really common words that kids see, like great, I had a great day. And those are going to, have to be kind of memorized, that they're not great and when they want to spell them. But when they are that frequent, I mean, most people know how to read and spell the word steak, but they probably weren't specifically taught it in school, right? Because it's just one of those words that you come, into contact with all the time. So I don't know that specifically I would teach them everything about the Great Vowel Shift, but history is English, or history is interesting to kids. Kids love history, right? The story helps to anchor the information. When you talk about, here I can feel it in my mouth, and this is where it went from like the A to the E to the E, it went up. And if you're familiar with the vowel valley, that's really all it's doing is kind of moving through that. And if you think about in different places around the country, I live in the South, so we have I, eh, right? It would go E, I, eh. The eh in Georgia is the same thing. My kids came home and they said from preschool, and it was like, you get what you get and you don't pitch a fit. And I was like, no, they don't rhyme. Get fit. But it's kind of a losing battle in the South half the time. They're going to say the same thing, right? A pin or a pen. What are you really asking me? Right. So, but giving them an overview would be good. Right. Okay. So someone said, with laugh, why not do an L, an AU, and a GH? And the thing is that that's not terrible, but if we've taught them that UGH is a grapheme, which it is, we are separating that grapheme, right? Because it's AU will typically say ah, right? So if it's UGH says, right? So that would be how I would do it. AU does not say ah. So it's that's why I do it. I mean, I think there's only one way to do it, but you can experiment. Okay. All right, let's see. Emphasis on oral language. Yes, oral language is huge. Because if you can't use it orally, you're not going to use it in your writing. So you want to make sure that kids can use this. Let's see what else I can email. Yes, you're going to get a certificate. All right. Oh, thank you, Imelda. She said nice things about me. Okay. No, can't wait to teach my kids this morning. That's good. And thank you, by the way, for staying this late. I understand it's late. Okay. Let's see. I would also like to ask on a specific reader, absolutely cannot spell. Yes. So there are a lot of kids that are good readers, but are not good spellers. And that is because reading is easier than spelling, right? If we're not going to explain to them why things are the way that they are, and they're not going to retain it, then it's not uncommon, and kids don't have to be poor spellers. A lot of times we think if we get them reading, then that's good enough. But if we're focusing on spelling, they absolutely are going to be able to read those words. Remember, because I said, like, if you can spell a word, you can read a word. So when you see that they're not a good speller, then you can go back and map these and talk to them about it and help them and look at the spelling errors that they're making, in their writing, because that's where you'll really see, because a lot of times kids can spell if you're asking them for like one word at a time, but once they have to use their whole working memory to think of the story that they're writing and then the sentence and capitalization and punctuation and where the story's going, then all of a sudden the words are misspelled, and that means they don't own those words. They're not locked in there. There's something that they have enough working memory space, they can retrieve it, but on the fly they can't, right? So we all do things like that. There are things that we can remember, but on the fly we probably wouldn't. And so it's that overlearned capacity is what we want. That's why I showed you games and ways to write it and all these different ways that you can make sure that they're automatized. And that game Hot Lava, I try to get them to be able to do it for speed, where they have to, cross the lava as fast as they can. That means now I'm hoping there's automaticity. With the card deck, we play grab, where the wild cards go in, and if you get a wild card, you get to take the whole deck, and you want to do it as fast as you can. And that's to get that overlearned, generalized reading, capacity going. And that way, all of it can be retrieved quicker and easier. Oh, Joyce. So I went on vacation in Rome, and I landed, went and took a nap, and then decided to walk around town. And I walked right out my door and into Joyce. And she's like, "Are you Jennifer?" So, hi, nice to see you again. It was pretty funny. Her husband was not thrilled to hear all about the rules that she's learned from me, but we had a good time catching up anyway. All right, let's see. Australia. Yeah, I can see that you're here, yo. And we'll send out a notification. We'll send out the certificate, and then we can send out a notification that it's on our YouTube channel. And but if you can also check back in a few days. Okay. The list by phonics pattern, I sorted them all. I'm gonna give it to people in the click. I'm not, gonna send that out just for this, because we've got little kind of different layers. If you cannot attend the click, I can still send you what was supposed to be in the click, because I don't know. I won't know if you actually attend. And so that click stands for Kendore Learning Instructional Community. So if you're looking for CLIQUE, it's not. It is this is KLIC. So Kendore Learning Instructional Community. It's a click anyone can join. So feel free to join us. Okay, so what if a child can't hear / identify the sounds, like the word kind? If a kid can't hear the word kind, then they probably can't say it, right? So if they can say the word, they can hear the word. They may not be able to segment, because maybe they need more practice with segmenting, but they can hear it. So people will often tell me that. They'll be like, my student can't hear blends. And I'm like, well, that means they can't say any words with blends in them. And I doubt that is true. So it's not that they can't hear it. They may not have been taught to segment it, and they may not have enough working memory capacity to hold it, or somebody told them it was one sound. So they don't know how to do that. But if I have the word kind, then I'm going to have k, I, n, d. So I'm going to end up having 4 sounds. And if they can't hear blends, then they would be saying what, kid or kind? I don't know. So it's sometimes I think, we say that they can't hear it, but it's really, they just need practice with segmenting. So you can do more, segmenting activities with them to make sure that they can hear them before even transferring it into, more on a phonological awareness level than just transferring it into a, into writing on a dot and jot. Hi, Mary. Good to see you too. Just saw you at IDA. Okay. I won the raffle. Yeah, you still get your prize. You guys are funny. Okay. Can you link? Yeah. Our store is kendorelearning.com, and then just up on the right-hand side. then there's a link to the store, but I can put it in the email. All right. And you own that word. Yeah, I consider owning a word is, if you just know how to read it, but you don't know how to spell it, you don't own that word, right? You might know that word, but you don't own that word. So a word you own is a word that you can read, you can spell, you can use it in your oral language. It's somethsomething that is the word that is no stranger to you, right? So I talked about hors d'oeuvre. Like I can read hors d'oeuvre, I can use hors d'oeuvre, I know what hors d'oeuvre is, but spelling it sometimes causes me confusion. The word myriad is a problem for me because I always want to say there were a myriad of opportunities, but you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say there were myriad opportunities. So I know how to use it. I just don't feel comfortable using it. So I don't use it. So we all have words like that, but we don't want most words, especially highly frequent words, to be in that category. Hors d'oeuvre and myriad, I feel totally fine with them being in a, I almost own them, but not really category. Right. Okay, so is the click the same info? It is some of the same info and more, so we'll go back over these things and go a little more in depth and do more mapping, and we go over the word list and talk about sorting, and we can do a lot of back and forth because it's more conversational. So this is definitely going up on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to see it. The click is on Thursday. You just have to register the same way that you registered on our website. For this. Okay. It is the click is it's a separate fee. So it's, I think it's like $40 or something, but, you get the card deck and the list of words. And let me tell you, it took me months to do all that work. So it's a time saver, but if you don't want to go, you are totally up to you. Right. So the dot and jot pages, I will be emailing you from the click. So you'll get those. The dot and jot that I was using is part of our student kit that we use here at our center. So on the other side, it has the soundtrack. I don't know if you've been in other clicks of mine or classes, you probably know what that is. But it is in that package if you want to do that. Okay, let's see. People in Sydney are going to sleep. Thank you for being here. Probably already asleep by the time I'm scrolling through all these. Do I have the students sort based on the assortment of words? I mean, I sort them for my instruction. Once they've learned them, they can sort them on their own because they'll know, but I don't have them sort them in advance because they don't know them. So once they've learned them, I can say sort them into, phonetic words or our discovery words. And a lot of times, when we have discovery words, the whole reason I like that term better than the others is that we can finally celebrate when we've discovered them, so they're not a discovery word anymore. If now, maybe I've taught ah, like O is ah, right? But not O as an open syllable like go. So as soon as I teach open syllables, they're like, oh my gosh, we discovered that word. We now know why it's doing what it's doing, because I don't want to teach every single rule to a 5-year-old. All that's going to happen is their brains are going to start oozing out of their ears. So it's my way of kind of saying, we're going to get to that. Right. And learn about it. And most of the time I get there, and if I don't, they probably forgot, but I can say, okay, we're going to get to that. Right. So that we're not overwhelming them, because kids are always saying, what about this word? What about that word? What about this word? If I told them everything I knew, it would end up being right over their head because I gave them too much information too fast. So if you think about, any topic that we were teaching young children, when we talk about, people coming over from, I don't know, the Pilgrims or something, we don't talk about, the horrible conditions and the people dying and the diseases and throwing them overboard. And, we might leave that out, when they're young. But we can talk about the hardships of the cold weather and things like that. We're not going to say it was an easy journey, but we may not have to go into detail on some of the diseases and things like that. So, but they will learn that later, right? They learn that as they move through other classes, they'll start getting more in depth, each year. So it's just whatever they can handle. Okay. All right. I think a lot of the questions were the same. A lot of them probably, written before I answer some of them. So I hope you guys sign up for the click and I can see your lovely faces. But thank you very much for attending tonight and staying late and listening to me babble. But I'm going to head out. So have a good night. Thank you.